We're all court. We're all baron or baronesses of the court.
Well, pearls.
Yes. Pearly, pearly. Anything I missed?
Sure, none. That's fine. It's more than
Whatever.
enough.
No.
Like when you've been in the SCA as long as I have, because, you know.
So how long have you been in the SCA? When did you start? How did you find
Okay, well,
it?
first I'm gonna acknowledge now. Rivkin, do you have? Are like we in gallery view and people can see all of us?
I think
Yes.
so. I'm checking. Have you already checked on?
Yes, we're in gallery view. Everybody can see us.
All right, I'll take off my sunglasses then.
Okay, and then Ashoxi's missing her sunglasses. They didn't arrive yet, so.
So
Oh, we tried.
As cool as
So
us.
how long have I been in the SCA? Like, it seems like my whole life, which is pretty true. I joined when I was 19 in Atlantia in college in 1983. So what's that like? It's way more than half my life, and 37 years, almost 38 years. November, I went to so I started in college because a friend of mine, well, a professor at the time, she's a friend now, but was in the SCA, and she had just moved to this little arts college in Virginia that I was attending, and she was a Laurel in the SCA, and there was nobody out there in, it was outside of DC about an hour, and she decided she wanted to have a SCA group, so she recruited some of her students, and we joined, and we made costumes, and we had fun. And this person is C.S. Friedman, the science fiction and fantasy author. And so I joined then, and I went to my first event in November. And it was very different right back there in Atlantia. We had an event on the mall in Washington, D.C.
Oh, that's cool.
With the monuments. So, and I was 19, and then so in the summer of 84, right, because I was there for 83, I don't even know if I came back for Christmas because it was so expensive and the Canadian dollar was so low that I didn't come back for vacations very much. So I came back for the summer, and I found the group in Seagirt. Before they were Barony Little Shire, and there was Beau Amid, who's now Oak. So he was in Seagirt, and I played in the SCA in Seagirt, and then I'd go back to college. So I played in Atlantia until 80, and I only went to two years of college there. And then I moved back out to Seagirt full time. So I went to college in Banff at the School of Fine Arts in the summer of 85. So I didn't really play, but I played a little bit on and off with Seagirt. And then in 86, I moved to Lionsgate. So I was in Lionsgate.
When did you start sort of doing your service in your arts? When did you really start getting into that?
Well, I did arts right from the very beginning because Celia, Mistress Tatiana, Celia was very, she is a Laurel. And so that's like what we were supposed to do, right? Like she just sort of made us do that. And we all picked different, we looked through costuming books and decided what we liked and and I liked Italian, so I became Eduardo, and that I've been Eduardo since the day I started. And in Atlantia, I won the in December or at 12th night, I won the 12th night costuming contest after being in the SCA.
Whoa!
4 months. I won the newcomers. They had different categories, but I won the newcomers, and so I started doing costuming and spinning and needlework and gold work and mostly textile stuff right away. And Seagirt had a really active, I'm sure they still do, had a really active arts community. We had dance practice, which was sort of arts every week.
Wow.
And it was a small enough group. So everybody did everything. And so then I started getting into Scribble stuff. And that's really where my first service stuff came in, because I did a lot of Scribble stuff in the early days. Like I was Thorin and Angrad's royal scribe for one or two. There were like, this is in the very, very old days. And we
Wow.
had like photocopied 8x10 sheets that we like, it was really different back then.
Charters.
They weren't even charters, they were called promissaries. We didn't have charters. So they didn't have a seal or anything. They just said that they were just a promissory that you would eventually get a scroll someday.
Maybe.
Like 25 years later, I got my award. My award of arms scroll was done. So and I got my award of arms really quickly because of the things I did in secret. And I wasn't really cooking back then, but I was helping with feasts and helping with events and those sorts of things. So I got my award of arms from Dak and Daedin.
Wow.
So so that's sort of cool, because Daedin's a good friend now, but she was like, I didn't know who she was. I think when I moved back the first time, I think Beric and Lisa were king and queen in 84. So they're sort of the first king and queen I sort of was aware of. And then Torgal and Aaron were really my first king and queen. Because we had Daffodil Tourney, which they still do, but it was a really much bigger event in the day, because Ursulmus, it was sort of like the lead up for May Crown, because it was Ursulmus, and then everybody would go to Daffodil, and it was cheaper to travel back then, and it wasn't like $100 each way on the ferry like it is now. So so I started out doing arts and service pretty early, but I clearly was like on the arts path early
From the
on.
very beginning.
Yeah, and then when I moved to Lionsgate, I became Amanda's apprentice.
That's
Amanda
awesome.
Campbell.
So you never saw any crown presence when you were in Atlanta?
Oh, a little bit, but not too much. Like we were out in the boonies. Like we weren't a group really. We were just a couple of college kids, and we would see them when we would go into the big events, but we didn't interact with them at all. Not like the way we do in Ontario.
Right.
And it's much more compact back there, right? Like you can go anywhere in like an hour, like you're in 3 different groups. So.
Right, and here it takes an hour to get across from one end of one group to the other.
Well, it takes us an hour to get from where we live in our barony to our baronial meeting.
Yeah.
So yeah. So and then 86 was Expo year in Vancouver, and we had the huge, like, I don't think you didn't join that early. You weren't around then.
I was graduating high school.
Yeah. I had just graduated high school, really, right?
My husband's alarm is going off and it's driving me crazy, so I'm going to be right back.
Okay, go smack him. So, so Expo 86 was huge because we had a big kingdom demo at Expo. Like everyone from all over the kingdom came to Expo, and we had a big demo, and we danced, and I was actually working at a off-site venue at Expo doing a show because I was in theater. So I was doing a show, so I would finish the show and then come to the demo. I think it's 2 or 3 days. And Melissa and Arthur were king at that point at Expo. But it was huge because we had the whole world, really, because it was a world exposition. And our kingdom put it on. We had dancing and fighting. We had all the demos, but ratcheted up to a huge degree. So that happened in 86. And then after Expo closed down, I moved to Kaid.
Oh, wow.
Because you go where the work is when you're an actor. So I had a show in Palm Springs that ran from, like, the show at Expo shut down in October, and I started at the end of October in the show and went through May into Kaid. But there was no one in the desert back then. No one.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had to write letters and we had to telephone people. And I had written letters to saying who's here in the desert, because we just didn't know anybody. Like there was a big college and everything, and there was nobody. An hour and a half, 2 hours to the nearest person.
So did you play it all there?
So, pardon?
Did you play it all there?
Well, I still continued to sew and embroider and do all my arts and crafts, but I was just alone. I was totally alone. But then one day, Hillary of Serendip, so that's a name from the past, way past. She was like the president of the SCA, called me. Like I got a telephone call. I picked up the phone and it's, "Hi, this is Hillary." And I'm like, "Hillary who?" like, like, she's like, "Hillary of Serendip, is this Eduardo?" I'm like, "Yeah, why are you calling me?" She goes, "Somebody joined in Palm Springs." Like she had called me to tell me that somebody had joined. So I said, "Okay, well, give them my information." So she said, "I'm just calling to make sure it's okay to give, your information." And so that's when I met Baron, well, he wasn't Baron then, Thurston. He had joined because the college had a subscription to Tournaments Illuminated, and he'd looked it up and he thought, "Oh, this is a really cool group. I want to join." And he joined. He didn't know anything about the SBA, like nothing.
How do you get a subscription to Tournaments Illuminated without knowing what the SCA is?
The college had
because the college had a subscription, right? So he just saw it at the college, and he was working at the college. He wasn't even a student. So he and his wife and I, we were the three people in the desert. That was it. So we got together and I showed them how to do a tea tunic and showed them how to embroider a tea tunic, and we did all those things. And then we eventually went into some events in downtown. That's what they call it, downtown Kaiit, because LA is not that far away, but it's still a ways. And that's when I think we went to a collegium that they had, and Ed and Ilaria were there because they lived down there. And Giles, that's when I first met Giles back in 86, 87. So yeah. So then I moved back to Ontario for about a year. And I would drive up, I would take a break at Ontario West War, and I'd drive up to Ontario West War and to drive back. People thought I was crazy, but it was we were in Ontario, we drove like that all the time.
Yeah.
Because in those days you would go to the West, right? For a weekend. Oh, let's go to San Francisco for a weekend.
And that's 16 hours each way?
Well, from Vancouver, BC, it's
man
longer, right? But you just get in a car, a whole bunch of people, and drive. So I moved back to Ontario for a year and just did a whole bunch of things. Oh, and in 1986, I think that's when I won the Kingdom costume contest. So I was still doing a lot at back then at an interesting level. And I moved back to DC. I decided I was going to move back to DC because the East Coast was way better from a job perspective for me. And the West Coast was hard. It was there wasn't a lot of professional theater back then, and there was so much going on the East Coast. And I moved in '88, right the month after Eric and Megan made me a Laurel. So in January '88.
What period was your costuming focus in the 80s?
Oh, it was all Italian. So it was entirely Italian. And I had gone back to DC to spend some time with my now ex-wife. And I had decided I was going to make a Rus costume. Totally at that time. Now you look back and you think, oh my God. But we didn't have as much information. We had no access to nothing, right? We had, even the academic journals weren't as far along as they are now. And you certainly didn't have access to them unless you got to a big library, and you couldn't get them online. But I made a Rus outfit, and I came back for 12th night, and so I was Amanda's apprentice. I was one of the very first apprentices in Ontario, because back then you weren't allowed to say that you wanted to be a Laurel. And so if you were an apprentice, you were like saying you were trying to be a squire, right? Like it was really weird. Like there were so many things. When I became a Laurel, you didn't get to swear fealty during your ceremony.
What?
As only knights swore fealty. The knight ceremony was, you got to swear fealty, but the Laurel and the Pelican, you had to go and wait till you swore fealty during coronation, not during your ceremony. That was for the knights.
When did that change? You know?
It changed pretty quick because I have a big mouth, and I no, it didn't change just because it changed because people were getting it was time. It needed to change. And, it's still, I think it's easier now, but, the aspiration, you could aspire to be a knight, but it was really frowned upon to aspire to be a peer of any other kind. It was bizarre. And I think it's cultural and it's shifting and changing, but,
Come here.
so I came back from DC, and I was wearing all this Rus, like with fur and red and puffy pants and boots and everything. And Amanda took me aside, because we didn't know back then, right? Like they didn't give you any warning. They made you a Laurel right away. There was no vigil, because that was also for the knights. Vigils were for knights. So we didn't have any of that. And so she says, did you bring, are we gone?
Nope.
Oh, someone's calling me, that's why.
Oh no, turn your phone off, man.
I know, like, someone's calling. Who is it? And it's an unknown call. Okay, I turned my phone off. So she took me aside and she said, did you bring anything else to wear? Because I had done Italian Renaissance from the time I started. I won the Kingdom Costume Contest with Italian. I said, no, I just brought this. What?
Oh no.
Like, why would I, no, I just brought this. I did a lot of research on this costume, and back then it was costume, it wasn't really clothing. I didn't bring anything else. I flew out from DC with a suitcase, right, for 12th night, because Eric and Megan were friends and I was on their retinue. And she said, oh, okay, well, okay, like that's all she wished. She wouldn't say anything else. So then I was elevated in Viking, which I guess is sort of appropriate for Ontier.
It being
but not
Ontier.
For me. Maybe not appropriate for me. Yeah. So, and then I was in DC for 2 or 3 years, and then my mother got cancer, and she's fine now. Well, she's not fine. She's my mother, so she's a little, I don't think she's watching, so. But when she got sick, I wanted to be closer, because it was a long way. So we moved to the Madrona area, because my wife was American. So we thought we would move to Canada, but it was really difficult for her to get credentialed to teach. She was a teacher. So we drew, like in DC, we didn't know Seattle at all. We just put a pin in the middle of Seattle, and we drew a line like 30 miles around Seattle, 35 miles around Seattle in 89, right? So no public transit. And she applied to all those school districts, because I knew I would have to probably work in Seattle. And then she got like 6 or 7 interviews, and she took the first one, and it was in Enumclaw. And it was like the fringe, like the furthest out you could get from Madrona. But then I started playing with Madrona back then. So, and the Madrona Culinary Guild, and I started getting into food through them. And
so that's when your period food passion really started to take root.
Yeah. I'd done some stuff in Lionsgate. Lionsgate had confraternity and they had a cooking group, but um, it wasn't the same. And we also didn't have a lot of resources back then. I mean, we had fabulous feasts, and now you get like, don't use that book. And we had a few other things, like we put together stuff. We had Dining with William Shakespeare, which is okay, but it's not the way it is now. And I started cooking, and then I don't remember how it happened, but I started writing a modern history newspaper column, a weekly column. The newspaper in Enumclaw picked, I don't know how it came up, but I started writing this weekly newspaper column on the history of food every week. So I wrote that, and that's really how, the Madrona Culinary Guild and that newspaper column, and I wrote that column for 6 years, and it was eventually was syndicated all over the Northwest, British Columbia, and California. And that's really when I really started like delving into cooking, because I had to have content every week. So like it really pushes you. And I sent a bunch of the columns to a friend, and he said, "Oh, this is interesting. You should see about going to Oxford to the Symposium on Food and Cooking." And then the first year I didn't get accepted, and then the second year I applied to go, I was accepted to go and lecture there at the symposium. So it really went deep quick.
So explain that. So you were actually a lecturer there?
So every year in the summer, they have the Oxford Symposium on Food and Cooking, and it's an international conference. So it's a conference that's held at Oxford, and the food historians from all over the world get together. And so that was in 95. It was in 95. And they have a topic every year. And you write a paper, and then you go and you lecture on the paper, and you give your paper and talk about your paper, and people ask you questions and that sort of stuff. And it was an amazing experience in 95. I went back again. Well, I was supposed to go back again, but 9/11 happened and we couldn't get out. But I wrote a paper on fish, and that's where I met some amazing food history people, not just in the SCA, but outside the SCA. So
that's super cool.
It was amazing. It was like the SCA allowed me to do that, right? Like I would never have had that opportunity if I hadn't been exploring these things in the SCA, like in the SCA context, and then bringing it into the modern world. It was an amazing experience. I got to meet Constance Hyatt. She was there that year, and Ken Albala, who's these probably don't know. You don't.
Nope.
Right, because they're food history people.
Right.
But Ken and I are still keep in touch. So that's really cool. And then that was a paper on fish, and I translated a recipe from Martino, which was sort of at that stage I was just sort of exploring it. And now everybody's like in the food community, and the SCA is like, oh, he's making another dish from Martino. Like I really love that. But that was the first one. It was dogfish with mustard sauce. And so I translated that and presented that paper, and it's been published. It's in the proceedings and stuff. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So Misty and I didn't join the SCA until I think about 95. 30th year was my first event, and then she was.
I was in like 96.
Yeah, she was a little later. But I didn't know you as a costume Laurel at that point. I knew you as this food Laurel who was like making like just so over the top. You had such a huge reputation, and I was so intimidated. That's Misty.
Yeah, and 30th year, 95, that was, I think that's the year that I was Kingdom Arts and Sciences champion.
I have a picture. Let's see.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Do I have to put my glasses on to see?
It should be pretty big.
Oh no, so that's
I mean, this isn't it. This is just, it's starting. So just give me a sec.
yeah, that,
There we go.
oh yeah, that's me.
You're so cute.
Yeah, with Thorne and Schnaden as when I was Arts and Sciences champion the first time.
And then the other one is the second time, or?
I think the other one is not, is the other one is just a picture of me. That, oh yeah, the other one is the second time. That's
I was going to say, you
stepping
have
down though, I think.
All right, stop.
Yeah, because the second time stepping up was with Kiva, Ulf and Kiva. So that first time was 95, and I think it was right around that time that I was, I did 30 year, and I was, so 30 year, we had bid on it. Ontier had bid on it. Now I'm getting like a Microsoft update. Do not update.
Focus.
Yeah, Microsoft. I shouldn't say that. They've been really good to me. 30 year, we had bid on it, right? And Lynn the Far Rover was the autocrat, and a whole bunch of stuff happened, and she couldn't autocrat like 6 months before the event. And so they had done 20th in Texas, and it had been a big deal, but it wasn't very well, it was well attended, but it wasn't like 30th year, eventually ended up being. And so John Louis had to take over as autocrat for 30 year, like in a really short amount of time. And so he put a team together, and I was the Arts and Sciences autocrat for that. We had 250 classes.
Holy crap.
I had a really great team underneath me. Like I did Arts and Sciences, but I had been working for the state at that point for quite a while. And I had like put a structure in place. So like I had Amanda did ITHRA, so she managed all of the classes, which were 250. And then I had like the 30th year papers, and somebody managed that. And we had a dance track, and somebody managed that. We had a music track, and somebody managed that. And we had a food track, and I did not manage that. Somebody else managed that. We had 5 or 6 feasts, all in different eras and periods. It was, I mean, do you remember any of that at 30th year?
So it was my first event, and I was introduced to the SCA through Avaloq, and actually more through Rocky and America, who were a couple that hung out with Avaloq. And I was working at TSI at the time, which is like a jewelry and metal supply store. And so I was seeing Torgal come in and buying supplies and with all of his jewelry. And it was a piece of his jewelry on a woman on America in a bar that got me interested in the SCA. I was like, what is that you're wearing in your neck? Because I was kind of a jeweler then. And she went on and on about the SCA. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to have to go check it out. So I sat and watched practice at Gasworks Park forever. And Avaloq put me on the field at 30th year.
Oh my God, at your first event at 30th year?
And it was like my second time in armor. And I got trampled by my own people. I went down and everybody ran over the top of me from behind.
Like we had never seen an event like that out here, right? Because on the West Coast, it was huge. We had budgeted, and I told John Louis the other day I was going to mention this. We had huge budget fights because we'd only budgeted for 2,500 people.
Holy crap.
That's what we had budgeted at. And I'm like, look, I got all of these arts things. I need this building. He's like, you have to deal without this building. It's another $200.
Oh my God. You're like, I'll pay for it.
It's not in your budget, right? Like it was called the floral building. So sometimes I just text him, I want the floral building, even now. I will not let it go. But like Isabella said to me the other day, she goes, well, you made the event work without the floral building. So, but we had budgeted for 2,500 people and 7,000 showed up. So as your first event, I can't even imagine it. Sometimes when I drive past that site, my feet still throb because we walked seriously, we walked so much. I never made it out of the Arts and Sciences Village. I didn't even know that they had fighting. Well, I did, but I didn't even ever get to the field or anything. I walked from the camp to the Arts and Sciences, stayed there all day, walked back. That was it.
And we were camped on the fighting field, and I never made it off the fighting field. I didn't see any of the arts and sciences. I didn't see anything else. And there was a huge party there every night, and
yeah, I never got to that party.
oh. Missed opportunities.
Yeah, and I had just stepped down as arts and sciences champion at that point because Garen had just stepped up. He was champion at that point. So yeah.
Can we go back to you winning arts and sciences the first time? Because I have to tell you, when I started in the SCA, you were like this legend, and like you did everything from scratch, and like from like seed to clothing, and honestly, it's super intimidated because I'm just like, I don't. So
well, so I was the second arts and sciences champion of Ontario. So I couldn't do the first one because Angrad and Allison and I were doing a movie in Spokane. So I was working in the movie industry. So I couldn't attend because we were right in the middle of shooting. So I attended this, I competed in the second one. And we'd had arts and sciences pentathlons before that, but we hadn't had a championship. So it was pretty organized. And you had to do 5 entries.
Wow.
And you could do up to 7 entries and drop 2. Like you could take the lowest scores and drop them out. So I did 7 entries back then. And they had a leaderboard back in that then. Well, they were trying to make it sort of like crown, right? Like, so they had everybody's name, and we had about 7 or 8 people doing, maybe more, going for champion, and everybody's name was listed, and all of their entries were listed, and then their scores were listed. Yeah,
wow.
It was not the right thing to do. It was really not the right thing to do. And I think, I did not grow the silkworms for the pillow. Like that's like a stupid legend.
An SCA legend.
Yeah, but I did spin the silk and dye the silk and knit the pillow. It was a Spanish, and now I look at it and it's like, it's awful. And it's faded and the dyes are fugitive. And I'm thinking actually that I want to go back and do an entry every year. I guess once we start again, do my 7 entries again, but once a year, to see like how much I've grown and what I've learned and all of that. Because I'm never, ever, ever entered. I shouldn't say ever because that's a long time, but I don't think I'll ever enter the full Arts and Sciences Championship again. And so then I did a cake from Martino, and I did a mead entry, and I did woodworking, and I did a really big range of things, because we were really interested, and I was too back then, of having like a someone that could represent in a broad way, not just a narrow and deep way. And so, yeah, and we had to do 3 of our 5 entries the next day. And there were 3 of us, so it was like 9 entries. It was really intense. And I talked really, really fast because I had a lot to say. But it was a good experience. It was like, it's one of the best experiences in the SCA that I've ever had, is entering Arts and Sciences Championship. And people say it's awful and it's intimidating and they cry. And for me, it really focuses me and pushes me, and I have to think about how to convey the information to people, and it's really something that is really makes me grow a lot. Like if you approach it that way, right? Like,
yeah.
I didn't approach it to win. I approach it, I've got 7 projects and I want to learn as much as possible.
So it's not a competition thing for you. It's more of a competition with yourself.
Oh, it's definitely a competition for myself, for sure. That's like exactly what it is. It's like, how much can I find out about this? It's not because you can't control like the outcomes, and you can't control what the judges are going to say, or if you're going to actually convey the information appropriately or anything like that. So if you're, like, I teach a class called how to win arts and sciences championship every time you enter, because I've entered twice and I won, but that's not really what it's about. What it is about is like setting your success criteria. Like, what does win mean to you? Like, if win means to you that you're going to be arts and sciences championships, don't do it. Like, you can't control that.
Yeah.
And it's not something that, if that's what you want, then you're not going to be a very good champion. Like, you need to, what does win mean for you?
In fighting,
And
we call that setting your victory conditions.
yeah,
Yeah.
success conditions, victory conditions, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Like, for some people, and I talk to my apprentices about that all the time. It's like, you have to figure out what you want to do and what win means to you, and it changes all the time, right? It changes constantly. So, and I don't think I was as aware of that back then, but looking back, that really is, and it definitely, I very, very much the second time went into it with that. This is about what I want to learn. I chose very specific entries because I wanted to also learn more about the criteria, because we were having a lot of discussions around the changes in criteria. So I wanted to learn some very specific things about me and about the way we were judging things. And that's the second time I did that very specifically. But yeah, it was an amazing experience too. And back then, well, I mean, I was the second, so there still isn't, talk to any champion, there's no job description, but there was really no job description, right? Back then,
Right.
like, I was the second. And you go through 3 sets of royalty as arts and sciences champion, because when you step up in March, you have 1 set, and then you get another one at July coronation, and then you get another one at 12th night, and then you step down in March.
That can be a really cool thing, and that can be not such a cool thing.
It's a wonderful thing. No, it is.
I love you.
Pardon?
I love you.
No, it is a wonderful thing, but you have to really approach, like, and I tell every champion that steps up, I said, this is a thing, you have to, like, your job can switch just rotate 180 degrees, because new royalties come on and they have a different expectation of you. Or they don't have any expectations of you. You really have to, as champion, and I don't know if it's this way in the heavy community, but I think it's more established in the heavy community. You have to set this is what I'm doing, this is what I think I should be doing. What do you think? Like, you have to approach them and talk to them about that.
So Mark's been heavy champion 3 times, and so that's 6 sets of royalty, and every set was different. Everyone had different expectations. Some wanted him to be really involved, some never talked to him the whole reign, except to get the sword in court. So I think it's the same.
So why don't we have job descriptions? That seems odd to me.
Yeah, the only thing we really have is the ceremonial. So you have the piece in the ceremony sometimes, unless it gets rewritten, which it does. I think we don't have the job descriptions because, especially for arts and sciences, maybe it's not the same with the other champions, although Bardic probably is. You don't know who you're gonna get. In the other champions, you do have, I'm not gonna say a type, but you do have, it's a very narrow field.
Right.
And with arts and sciences, and then to a degree with Bardic, although it's a little bit different with Bardic because they need to entertain, but are they entertaining with stories or songs, or what does the arts and sciences champion do? I mean, we mostly tell people, if you ask previous arts and sciences champion, I think they'll say, it's sort of like becoming a peer, keep doing what you're doing, but teach, travel, encourage the arts. It's sort of these very high level things. Sometimes stand at court, sometimes not stand at court. Don't embarrass yourself. Do not drink what the heavy champion passes you in court.
Especially if it's skeggy.
Actually, the last time around, it wasn't the heavy champion, it was the equestrian champion. She was always the one that was best liquor. So yeah, it's really an amazing experience. I can't recommend it enough. I mean, I know some people are say, you know, I could never do it. Well, just do one. It's not about winning, or it's about stretching yourself and getting feedback. Oh, and the judges are so mean. Well,
They're just people.
It's not. It's changed so much, first off. And secondly, like, you know, when I judge, I say like a million good things, and I give people sources, and I try to encourage them, and I give them my phone number and my email and my, you know, text messaging and all. And but you just say one thing, like, maybe you could have, and then they're like, oh my God, they were awful to me. Like, no, did you see the like 25 other things that we said that were really encouraging and nice, and you did a good job on this? And so you learn about yourself emotionally, as if you're open to that as well. And it's just an amazing experience. Amazing.
So why would you never do it again?
Because it's a really lot of work, and my feet are really tired, and I'm old.
I've never entered arts and sciences, even single entry. I've never done it.
Never even a single entry? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I won in my first year in the SCA. I won the beginning costumers guild contest, and then I entered costumers guild again, and I don't think I won intermediate, but I think Isolde gave me a silver. What is that they give? It's not a silver lily.
Scissors?
No.
I know what you're talking about. The Costumers Guild thing.
Yeah. Anyway, and it meant a lot to me.
So, and I was Costumers Guild administrator for a while too. So when Asha was Costumers Guild administrator forever, like she started the guild, and then when she and Foggy started Pastiche, it started to blend together. It was just, so they stepped down, she stepped down as administrator, and I stepped up as administrator. And I was administrator for 3 years, so that was really service. The 30th year Costumers Guild, I was the first Laurel secretary, because we didn't have a Laurel secretary in the day. So I came in and I was like, what do you mean you don't have like, nobody's taking notes? What are you talking? So I started taking notes and became the first Laurel secretary. And then Elizabeth, she was the second one. Didn't you? And you guys interviewed her.
Yeah.
So she was the second one, but I was secretary for 7 years because no one wanted to do it. So
that's why I wrote a job description with term limits.
I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Somebody has to take it.
I think it's a really important job, but it's something that really needs to be rotated among people.
It's hard because it's also, you have a lot of people with a lot of opinions in any of them, and you can't do that when you're secretary. You have to really manage back then. I mean, it's a little bit different now. I think that a lot of the royalty, and especially if they've reigned before, really take a role in that. But you had, at least back then, you had to really manage the conversation and say, yeah, no, you're, like, yes, that's good. I'll put them on the list, but we're talking about this right now.
Yeah.
It was a lot of people management back then. And we did everything by mail. Like, right? There was no email.
There's no Facebook groups.
There was no Facebook groups. There was no Facebook groups. There was no email. Like, a few of us had email, but it was, not like it is now. I mean, we were using Netscape browsers that were in, black and white. Like, it was awful. So, the things have changed so much with the advent of the internet and modern telecommunication.
It's transformed the STA. It'll be really interesting to see what this COVID situation does to also transform the STA. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I really think that we were already moving to a much more dual system of online and offline, and some people played online like almost exclusively, and some people played offline almost exclusively, and then there's a group that sort of bridged the two.
Mm-hmm.
We call them junkies.
I think that and I hate to say this because Elizabeth said it last week, but I think what brings the SCA to life and what's important to me are the real life interactions and the sharing face to face and the creating things that are tangible and
Mm-hmm.
in touch. And it's just not the same. I mean, I did a class last week or the week before last with Disa on cooking over an open fire and doing the egg recipes from the Martino manuscript. And it just wasn't the same. It was almost, I had a good time. I hope that people liked it. I conveyed some information, but it wasn't the same. It almost felt depressing to me.
Yeah. There's no interaction and feedback. I think one of the best things about teaching is getting that interaction.
Yeah.
I did a like a quick how to tape up your feet to make booties for this little Scythian costuming group that we have. And I did it as a Skype meeting with Teresa. And so she asked me questions, and then I taped Molly's feet. And so there was interaction there, and that helped a lot.
Yeah, and Disa does that too. Like, she'll sort of funnel the questions and that sort of thing. And it's also difficult too. It's difficult when you're like managing a fire and you're trying to cook eggs and you're trying to do all these things at once. And then it got too hot. It was one of the hot, like, it was the one day that it was in the 80s and it got too hot, and my phone got it, it got the little, your phone is too hot.
Oh no. Technology breakdown.
And it shut down. Luckily that happened before, and I switched to the computer, but it wasn't the same. And there's not the and then the eggs, like, because we were doing spitted eggs and one of them exploded, and you don't have the fun of they always explode if you don't turn them fast enough. And there's just not that, like, I taught that same class at Collegium in Glenmere, and we'd had such a good time. And it also went on for two and a half hours there. And it was like 45 minutes done here, like, because there's no, like, oh, what if we did this? And then we'll, break out another pipkin and try something different.
And you can get other people's hands in there to work stuff too.
And then you get somebody else to spit an egg. And, it's just more, that's what the SCA is about for me. I think, though, that we have done a pretty good job. Like you guys, this is, at least we're trying different things to connect with people.
Yeah.
So what I think, like, even though in person is much better, at least this way, you are becoming accessible to people that maybe never knew.
They're afraid of me.
Of your talents and skills with cooking, right? And now they know. And so when we all get in person again, they can go and say, this is the guy. I need to seek out this guy. At least that's kind of what I'm hoping.
So I hope that it doesn't, though, become even more cliquish and insular, because people are doing their own little electronic things and not sharing as much. Like, this is good because it's open and it's sharing and all of that. And Disa's is the same, but yeah. I know that there's so much going on.
I haven't been invited, so I don't know.
Right, exactly.
Well, like, we have a Scythian costuming group that we're doing little things, but we would be doing that we would be doing that in person if this wasn't going on. So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But it's hard. Like it's like getting into clothes, like SCA clothes is strange. Like right? And putting on your regalia, and
I've
it's
been
just
kind of enjoying it because I get to do it in my house. And so I get to spend time on my hair and like, you know what I mean? Like I'm not in a sweaty tent right after fighting and things aren't sticking to me. And so I've been kind of enjoying being a Barbie doll, like a little SCA Barbie doll.
Experimenting with hairstyles and
I can do a lot. So much of the stuff that I do isn't, at least now, isn't as shareable in a group environment because it's more research. I'm like, oh yeah, so I'm translating this recipe from Renaissance Tuscan. Like,
Right.
right? It's like very like unless somebody's really, really interested, it's sort of boring.
yeah, so much of the art stuff, so much goes on beneath the surface and when you're home alone doing your thing, and then when you're up for interaction you come out and you share and you exchange ideas.
Yeah. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. But I would like to go. I don't know if we're going to do it this weekend. We might have to wait till next weekend. We're going to put up our tent in Brian's parents' back 40 way off and just have because I just need to camp. Like that's another thing. I just need to be outside and camping and have a fire and that sort of stuff.
And be away from technology.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Ontario West War was great because you couldn't get cell service. Right.
So tell me about Ontario West War and like the food dates. Is that what it's called? Or
Cook's Plated. It's my very favorite event.
I think I have a picture somewhere, but I want to know how that started because you guys do such cool stuff.
Yeah. So Juana Isabella de Montoya y Ramirez. Can you say that fast?
No.
You can. I'll give you a trick. So Duchess Juana from the West and I are kindred spirits. Some say evil twins, but we say kindred spirits. And it just sort of emerged naturally. And so if you ever do want to say her name, you just have to remember supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Juana Isabella de Montoya y Ramirez.
Get the rhythm down.
And we started it, and there, the first couple years, I think there are only like probably 10, but there's just 50 people now. And we do it's sort of the same group from the three kingdoms that do the West Coast Culinary Symposium. And we
say the three kingdoms. Are you talking West Ontario and Caid?
West Ontario, Caid, yeah. And Caid, they don't come to Ontario West as much as West and Ontario, but there's a group of cooks that come every year. And we just cook everything that's nobody else, that we wouldn't be able to serve at banquets.
Too adventurous, is that why?
What?
Because it would be too adventurous, or?
Yeah, because it's too adventurous, or it takes or the process is too long. Like I almost always, and people get upset if I don't make it, I make the frog's legs from Martino, which are deep fried with a green sauce. But well, first off, they're hot, like to make deep fried frog's leg for 100 people is
not happening.
And then probably only 10 of them are going to eat them. Right? So we just make stuff like that. We make like the livers in caul fat with fennel salt. And last year, Juana did a deep fried, butter on a spit, where you take a cube of butter, and you put it on a spit, a turn spit, and then you put batter over it, and you turn it slowly. It's like the deep fried butter from the fairs. And it's a Renaissance Spanish recipe.
Deep fried butter is a thing?
At fairs in the Midwest.
Do you eat it off a stick like a hot dog, or?
Yeah, they deep fry it like deep fried Oreos and deep fried. Yeah, it's a big thing.
Oh.
Yeah,
I've never ever heard of that ever.
Because we don't really have that kind of stuff at fairs in the Pacific Northwest.
Wow.
But they'll deep fry anything at a fair.
Wow.
Yeah, so deep fried butter, deep fried ice cream, deep fried. So, but this is a Renaissance recipe. So we really geek out. Like we plan like what normally I would have already planned like months ago what I was going to make and start gathering ingredients, and we cook over coals with period equipment. Um, one year I did a poultry tasting, so we had all the different types of poultry. So we experiment that way too. So I had duck and pheasant and quail and goose and chicken, and um, I had like 8 different types of poultry that we roasted exactly the same way so that we could compare them. Because then when you go back, like we have to use chicken for 100 people, right? It's cheap and it's the way that you have to do it for a feast, unless you're doing perfectly period feast. And you just have to, so we were like, well, how far off is chicken to some of these other meats? So we roasted them all and tasted them with the same sauce, and we really geek out, and we bring, you know, our crazy recipes that we want to try. We always have a fish day on Fridays, so we all eat fish except a few people that won't eat fish. And it's so much fun. It's my favorite one, but now it's hard because I have a spouse that's very involved in the SCA too. Like before with my ex, he wasn't really involved in the SCA. He'd just come and sit in camp or take care of the kids, or so we just did the cooks camp. But now with Finn having his own SCA life, it's like we try to trade off back and forth. So this year was supposed to be cooks camp, so we try to do cooks camp and then Trouble, his Knights camp, and then Cook's camp, and go back and forth. But I miss
That
it.
balance, the SCA balance in a relationship is really hard to strike, especially when kids are involved.
It wasn't up until recently. But it is, yeah, it is. And because we have our own, we didn't, we weren't together and grew up in the SCA, obviously, because he wasn't even born when I started the SCA. My award of arms is a month. I shouldn't. My award of arms is a month older than him.
Yes.
Yeah, I got my award of arms in September of 1985, and he was born in October of 1985.
Wow.
Yeah. So we didn't grow up. So we have very separate lives in the SCA. I mean, I didn't know half the people that he knew. I mean, I knew of them, and we were in peerage councils together and that sort of thing, but I didn't really know them the way I do now. And he didn't know the people, he didn't know any of the cooks to the degree that.
You have expanded each other's worlds.
Yeah, and the kids are getting to an age too where they don't want, well, Elise likes to do the horsey stuff, but they don't want to really participate. If they come, they just stay in camp, or they play D&D with your kids, you know, like, yep. Yeah, in the tent, in clothes. I'm like, you cannot come out of the tent unless you're wearing a tunic. That's the only rule, right? Like,
take those soccer shorts and put them away.
Well, my kid thinks that any fancy dress is a costume for SCA camping. Like, that's how.
Oh, that's good to know. I'm gonna go shopping now.
She's gonna be that like Las Vegas dance girl that comes to Eagles.
Yes, she stole these from me. So
with glasses on.
Bring them up for me.
Like, yeah, you have to put your glasses on and your sequin dress. It's totally SCA. It's totally period. What period is it? It doesn't matter. It's the SCA. If they had those sequins, they would have done it.
Oh, definitely. It's fabulous, right? I mean.
So I'm totally going shopping for Molly now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I haven't said anything.
Tell me, your role in the whole inspirational equality, or that's right, inspirational equality movement.
Yeah. So that was, so I think that first thing was that I can't remember what year it was. It had to be 98 or 99. Sonia came back to the SCA. Do you remember that?
Yes, yes.
We
Yeah.
do, because we clothed her.
Yeah, well, she fought for me in Crown,
I remember.
right? So that was a huge, huge deal way before inspirational equality started. And there were like, it was amazing. And I had just come out. I had just left my wife, and she'd come back from, I think she was living in Florida, but had come back, and it was a pretty big deal, and everyone was very, very supportive. It was amazing. So that was sort of the first step. Like, and I was really concerned because I'd been in the SCA for a long time at that point.
Should we explain who she is to people who don't know?
You can, yeah. So Sonia was a knight in the SCA who lived in Bellingham, but as in pre-transition. So she transitioned from Sir Raphael to Sonia.
I thought it was Celine.
Named Selena.
Selena.
Yeah. And she's disappeared. It didn't. I think there would be way more space now, but back then it was very difficult.
Yeah.
It was hard for me to come out in '98 as a gay man, but it must have just been tremendously hard to come out back then. As transitioned into her natural state.
Yeah.
But now I think it would be much easier. But it wasn't an easy road. But everybody in Ontario really, like, when we came into court, people applauded. Like, it was really emotional back then. Even more than inspirational equality was emotional. I mean, that was really emotional. But that was the first sort of step. And then Ariel, Mistress Ariel, sort of started talking about the inspirational equality movement and why couldn't same-sex couples fight and why were we left out. And so she started it and asked me if I would support her and support the movement. And I said, sure, let's talk about it. And so we made a petition to Miranda and Tiernan to bring forward to the BOD. And I don't even remember what year it is. There was so much going on. Like, it was so fast and furious, and it was so many details, but that didn't happen. So we decided that every reign we would do that. And it sort of just grew, and then it was the Facebook had just sort of started. And so the two of us worked on a Facebook group, and it just blew up it blew up worldwide, really. It wasn't even just on Tier anymore.
I want to say it was like 2011.
Yeah, I want to say 2010, 2011.
And we had a strategy, and we'd both done a lot of work. When I was working for the state, I was on a lot of different committees for equality, because we didn't, like, when I came out, we didn't even have health benefits for same-sex partners at the state. So I had a lot of experience with that, and we just basically had a strategy, and we worked it for, like, we were shocked, because it was 4 years from the time we started to the time they changed the language. And the language wasn't perfect. It finally is now, like, they finally changed it, but it wasn't perfect when it was changed. But just to have that amount of change happen in 4 years was unbelievable. Like, it was unbelievable. And it wasn't, interestingly enough, even in Ontario, it wasn't as accepting as when we fought in Crown. Like it was really awful in some places. Sometimes it was people swore at us in court, called us names in court, like in front of the king and queen. Like we're coming in and they are calling us awful names. It just was disgusting. But it also really, you found out who your friends were really quick. Right? And the vast majority of Ontier was very supportive. But there were old timers in the West that were just over my dead body. And we were like, okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Still not dead, by the way. But it changed a lot of people's minds. I think we were, we weren't like, act up. We weren't like take civil action. We were just very clear about this isn't fair. This is what's fair. It's not period. Okay, here are 25 examples where it's period. Like we just plugged away at it.
And it was really based in love. It was coming from a place of love, and that was very clear.
Yeah, and people just, they made up all sorts of reasons, like, oh, well, they're not romantically involved. I'm like, well, but you can fight for your daughter. Are you romantic? Okay, I don't want to think about that one. So if that's what you're saying and you fought for your daughter.
Right, and siblings fight for each other.
Right.
Why should Uther get to make his sister queen and my sister can't make me queen?
Right. So it was a really, really interesting experience. I never thought I would be doing that in the SCA, but it was both of us. Both of us really, we probably talked. We definitely talked almost every day, sometimes for hours, and it was just the beginnings of Facebook. And when we started, it was just like 100 people in Ontier, and we were working towards it, and it just exploded. I mean, I think at the end, and it's still a group, you could still go on. I think there's 3,500 people on the list.
You get a little spark of glee when a same gender couple gets to reign together.
So I've tried to go. I've missed one coronation. I try to go to all the coronations. It's not. I sort of feel like I don't really feel like a spark of glee. I just sort of feel like content. Like this is the way it's supposed to be, right? And it was really, really amazing when my apprentice became like, that was like, okay, that was amazing. Like that was like it was someone I knew that was impacted. So that was really great. But if it's just somebody in another kingdom or another principality, it's great. And I feel joy, but I don't feel that excitement that I felt with Seamus and
right.
Right. So, and now it's just not like somebody asked me the other, like last crown or the crown before, oh, how many same-sex? I'm like, I have no idea. Like how many same-sex couples were in the lists? I don't know. There were 89 people or 72 people or how many couples there were, but it's at least in our kingdom, it's
not even something to make a big deal out of. It's just part of our flow.
Right.
Thank
but
you for that.
It's still not that way. And well, thank everybody that did it. So first off, I should say thank you. I appreciate that. But it really was like, there's no way that it was such a movement. Like there was no way that any one or two persons could have done it. We needed to have that momentum, and we had to have that mass.
And you had to have support of a crown with Dagmar and Thorin.
And Ulf and Kiva, and almost all the crowns of Ontier were very supportive. It did. I think it helped to have visible peers in the league. Like it helped that I was who I was. Like, I'm not gonna deny that it was easier for me because I didn't have anything to lose. Like, what are you gonna do? Right?
Yeah.
I'm still gonna do what I'm gonna do, and so it helped. That helped a lot. But it was the mass of people, and there was no moral argument and there was no legal argument, and there, especially with what was happening in the nation at the time. So it just converged, right? And then they decided, oh, it was okay if same-sex barons were, so same-sex baronial couples. But you still couldn't fight in crown. Like, it was just this sort of weird convergence that you had to navigate. And I wouldn't, I don't think it was a really interesting point of my SCA career, but I think, arts and sciences champion eclipses that for me personally, right? It was something that was great for the society as a whole, but from a personal standpoint, like I didn't have any skin in the game, really. I wasn't a fighter.
Right.
I didn't fight for your husband at the time.
I only got into armor so that I could fight in that first time. Well, I'd been in armor before. I used to fight in wars, in Clinton War and some of the other wars, but I got specifically back into armor so that I could fight in that tournament. And I get for him too. So, and I was arts and sciences champion at that time. So it was really interesting, and I had a game plan on, out and two and not get hurt.
You won one, right? Or two?
I won one. It was bizarre. I went 3 rounds. It was just awful because I had this whole plan because I was arts and sciences champion. So on an unbelted side, I got to pick, right, first, because I was the highest in the order of precedence. And so they evened up the sides, and Christian pulled me over to the other side. I'm like, no, I'm not going over to the other side. Like, no, I have a plan. Ian, I'm going to pick Ian. He's not going to hurt me. And then, I had this whole plan, right? And then he does, so then somebody chose me and thought that I was this hot stick jock. And I'm like, oh, no. I've been for 3 or 4 months. I'm only doing this because it's the first time we get to fight in inspirational equality. He says, oh, okay. And then I took him out in 2 shots. And I was like, are you, he's on the ground, and I'm like, no, get up. What are you, this is not supposed to happen this way. Now I have to stay in this stupid armor for another 2 fights. So, yeah, I was not happy. And then
it's not your passion.
No. I really, I do like it. I hate the armor part. I like the fighting part. I like thinking about it. I like I like the physicality of it. I like that, but I hate the armor. I hate it.
I don't like to smell like helmet.
Well, I don't mind that, but it's the pinching. It and everybody says, well, you're not wearing the right armor. Yeah, I liked Finn's armor is good. But I don't like it doesn't fit right here, and the elbow is not right, and then Bane's just well, you get some better armor, idiot.
Well, that is true.
Right. But as a new fighter,
I spend the years figuring it out.
Right, and I don't want to do that. I'm too old to do that. And then the next fight I got Bane was and then I got Brendan Shimmering Star. So these 2 tall guys, so that was fine. I was out, and it was fun. But I fought because I wanted to be able to be in that first tournament. It was really, that was important. So, because we'd worked so hard.
Right.
Yeah. So what I don't even know what time it is. Because you made me turn off my phone.
It's all a part of our plan.
It's 8:15.
8:15. Is anybody watching even?
Yes.
Oh yeah. You've got Juji is making comments, and Isabella and
And Isabella and Gigi I've known since, well, I've known Isabella since 1978 in high school, because we went to high school together before the SCA, and Gigi as well, we went to high school together. But they joined after, like I don't know why they joined, like they thought.
Did you introduce them to the SDA?
Well, I guess sort of, but I don't really remember like, oh, come to this event. You'll love, like, just sort of part of my life. So, and
Izzy says she's fact checking.
when we met, it was 78 or 79, because I was in grade 10 and she was in grade 12.
Aww.
Yeah.
Marty says he's here. Adriana the Fierce says she's here. There's a bunch of people watching.
Yeah.
We are loved.
Yeah. So,
when you were made a lion, how did that feel?
Like I was going to pass out. Like, it was so shocking. Well, you were there. You were sitting right beside me. So, it was like I was gonna pass out. Like the air was all sucked out. Like it was the furthest thing from my thoughts. I just couldn't believe it, because the people that are lions to me were like Amanda and Gerhard and Manfred, and like people that that I like never thought I could be like, and it was just like so shocking that they would offer that to, well, not even offer, it's not like a peerage, right? Like they don't offer you, they just go
Poof.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, I think that it took years. Like when I became a Laurel, it took a lot of time for me to like accept that. And because I moved to the outside the kingdom, and you know, I was on the retinue of the king and queen, and there was all sorts of, it took a little while to get my head around that. But once I became arts and sciences champion, it was like, yeah, you're like, yeah, done, I'm fine with that. But lion is so different. It's like, because you are, you know, they're recognizing you as being an important part of on tier, that you are on tier. I mean, that's what they say. And it's just like, but I'm not old enough to do. I'm not, right? But it's just the most shocking thing. Like, you don't expect it. I don't think anybody ever expects it. And it's just all the air in your lungs just goes out. And it takes a long time. Like, I think it helps when other lions come and say, no, this is their majesty's decision, and this is why, because we would be, you know, if you didn't do these things, we would be less than. It takes a long time to get your head around. I think it's been 8 or 9 years.
At least 6.
Yeah. And I think I'm just finally starting, but then now there's there's more people after me now that are from sort of my generation.
I was going to say vintage.
Vintage. Yeah, like wine, not cheese.
Exactly.
That it's a little bit easier, because when you're, you know, they were all important people in the growth of on tier of the kingdom. Like the lions before me were Gerhard, like I just go back to Gerhard and Amanda, who were formed on tier from a principality.
Well, or Rowena and Edward the Stuffy.
Rowena, right? And Beric and Liesel, like, you know, second, what are they, second king and queen or third king?
It was early.
Right? Early on.
And Alfred.
And Alfred, and I think it helps to now see in more of in context. Like that's helped me a lot, right? Like because before you feel it feels like out of context. It feels like you shouldn't be part of that. But once you have more time, you have more of a context around it, and it becomes a little bit easier. But it's still crazy. Like it's just still feels crazy. So yeah, you know.
So can I ask you kind of a weird question? I love your coronet. Is that gold plated?
No, it's
So pretty.
of course it's not plated. It's solid. No, it's plated. It's 24 karat gold plated.
It's so beautiful. Did who made the enamels?
So it's like I designed the coronet. I wanted really something that was so people always ask me like what's my persona, and I say SCA. Right? Like I don't like I do it mostly people know me for doing Italian stuff, and that's what I like to do for my cooking. But like I'll wear anything. Like I don't have a real persona. Like I don't have a story, and I play in the SCA. So I designed it, and I wanted it to be really SCA. So Fior Leaf, can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my badge, and Fior Leaf did the enamels for that. Well, this is part of my badge, and then this is the other part of my badge, and Steer Car made those.
Cool.
And then this is a reliquary from Italy, a real from the 1400s in Italy that Mark
Wow.
made. And then a friend in the West made the pelican.
We didn't even talk about your pelican. When did you get your pelican?
About 20 years ago. About
10 years after the Laurel.
10 years after the Laurel, I got pelican. We can talk about that in a minute. And then William Bjornson set these gems that I got from India, and then Torfin did the lions.
Oh, wow.
So cool.
From they're based on the lions from the Ontier lion.
Who put all those pieces together?
And then William Bjornson. And then you can't really see the diapering, can you?
Yeah, you can see it.
So
Yeah.
that's the stamp on the kingdom coin that Jan Canuli made.
Oh.
So yeah, so it's all very on tier. And then William Bjornson put the fleur-de-lis and the pearls, and he assembled it all. So.
Wow.
And then it's sterling silver with 24 karat gold, because I really wanted gold, but I couldn't, like, you can't afford that kind of gold. And brass is just a pain. But yeah, I know, but you got to clean, like, it's going to start to get tarnished.
You can tell the difference though. I mean,
Yeah.
That's like the dream team to make a cornet.
I know. Well, it took like 3 or 4 years, because I collected everything over the years, and then finally he put it together, and then it's like my divorce cornet, because after yeah, I have divorce tattoos too, but you'll have to wait to see this. It turned out way better than I could even imagine. Like I love it so much. So,
It's amazing.
Yeah. So
did you have a cornet that you wore before?
Yeah, so I had a couple of cornets. So I had the first coronet that was given out. So Cathal Sean O'Connell, and I don't know if anyone even remembers Cathal, but he was a tribe from Seagirt, and he was the first laurel. He was made in Ontier. He was made at the first event when we became a kingdom. And they had the little brass ones with the pewter laurel medallion with the split rivet through it. So I had that for a long, long, long time, and then I gave that away, and I can't remember who I gave it to first, but it's gone through many, and I think it was just given out at about a year ago again. So I had that for a long time. Then I had like a $9 laurel circlet that I got off of Amazon, and I think Martin has that now. And that was cool though, because I could take it off my head, and when I saw somebody that was doing something really cool, I'd take it off and I'd break a leaf off and give it to them, and they'd be like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, "No, don't worry, it was on Amazon."
I bleed for you.
And then then I didn't have a cornet for a long time. Well, because then I didn't have the pearls, so.
Yeah. So that's probably your favorite piece of regalia that you've ever had.
Oh yeah, it's definitely my favorite piece of regalia. Well, though the lion is pretty amazing, but yeah.
Do you have a laurel medallion from Amanda or anything like that holds a lot of emotional?
No, so we didn't. I have the original pewter medallion that was made like by Gerhard, but it wasn't Amanda's.
Right.
They didn't really give, like back in those, like that was, like I've been a laurel now for 32 years, or we didn't have the same traditions like that.
Right.
So I don't have that anymore. So I gave that medallion to a friend, to Thurston, who was the person back in Caid that started, because he saw the tournaments illuminated. So he's a really amazing artist, but Caid made him a knight. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't know any, like, I'm sure he was totally great fighter, but, and he was Baron of the barony. And, but when I went down to his knighting, I wanted to give him something personal. So I took my laurels medallion and I sewed it into his hem. So you couldn't see it. But what he's done for all my apprentices is he's taken it out, because the tunic is destroyed now, and he's taken a cast of it, and so he gives me those to give to my apprentices.
Wow. And is he a laurel now?
No, he's not. After he was Baron, he stopped playing for a while, and they're playing again. But and they were at Ontario West War a couple years ago. But no, he's not a laurel. So yeah, it's definitely my favorite piece of regalia.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So, it would be my favorite too. Yeah. It's gorgeous.
You should do it.
Well, maybe I will. We'll see.
I didn't want a really fancy coronet until I could have pearls. Like that was like the thing. And for so long it was like I had, I was a laurel and I was a pelican and I'd had all the king, and I was like, I want the pearls. I know they don't mean anything, but I was like, because I have pearls on my arms. And so Dagmar and Thorn gave me the court barony after I was on their retinue and was their cook for their reign. So that was cool. So do you want to hear about the pelican, or
let's hear about the pelican.
So, that was Darius and Morgaine, and I still remember it because he broke my ribs. Yeah.
Did he buffet you?
No, he didn't buffet me. So he they did a big feast, not a feast, but like an appetizer thing on the Eric. And then now Izzy's going to probably fact check this. So you should watch her comments, because she's probably,
will.
Okay, I'm watching.
Yeah, it's a good thing she can't talk, right? So we were doing the setting up for the appetizers after court. Everybody was invited, and they were gonna have a nice sort of just get together for the kingdom, because you could do it because there was only 300 people, right? There were 350 people or so, and we were at in Vancouver, and I had gone to the store with, I don't know if Izzy was there, but I know that Bianca was there in the car, and we were talking, and Isabella was my apprentice back then, and so was Bianca, and we were talking about stuff, and I had very, very, very strong feelings about the fact that we were all peers, Like we were one peerage, that the knights, the laurels, and the pelican were like, should be just peers, and we should act together, and we should talk more, and all of that. And it came up in the car. Bianca said, well, what if you're offered a pelican at some time? I said, I'll say no. Like, that's ridiculous. I'm a peer already. Like, I don't need to be a peer. Like, I just didn't think it was something that was right for me. I mean, I had no, like, oh, that person's stupid because they have 3 peerages, but it wasn't right for me. I wanted to be a peer and only a peer. I want to be recognized as a peer, not a laurel. And then so we're preparing the appetizer stuff, and we're sitting and we're listening to court, and we're sort of back and forth listening. And then they called up Edward the Stuffy and 3 pelicans, and they started talking about this person. And I remember sitting next to Kat and Bianca thinking, who are they talking about? Like in the old days, they just talked about the person, and they would never say who it was until the very end. And then it got closer and closer, and then it was Kat and Izzy are like, I think they're talking about you, and they called me up, and I'm like, go get me a drink. And I went up, and Her Majesty Morgaine, they said, will you accept this? And I said, no. And they were like, what do you mean? Like, what? No. I'm like, no, Your Majesty, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't accept this. I'm already your peer. I am your peer. I am your liege lord. You're my liege lord and I can't accept another peerage. There's no, like, I can't. And she said, okay, we'll have a vigil. And so then and I said, okay, well, we can have a vigil, and we can talk about it. And then really, the vigil was really, really what it convinced me, because I was not going to do it. I was going to say, I want to be a peer, and I want to be an example for all people, not a service person or an arts person. I want to be a peer. And I just thought it was going to diminish that vision that I had. And I think it was mostly Elizabeth Braidwood, which she doesn't play anymore, but said, but that's not all it's about. It's about other people being able to see a pathway into the peerage that you've created, because you've done the service to like, at that point, there had been very few, if any, sort of pelicans for service to the arts. It was the typical sort of run events pelican, and sweep the floor pelican, and hold an office pelican. But I had done so much from a service perspective for the arts and sciences that it sort of said, okay, well, I see that, but I'm really, like, I want us to understand that this is all of us. This is the peerage. So I'll accept it, and I'll do it if a peer from each member order speaks for me. And so that's what they did. And it was one of the very first times that all the peerages spoke. And Deodan spoke. Deodan, who given me my award of arms, spoke as a royal peer.
That's one of my favorite traditions, is having one of each peerage speak. I think it's really wonderful.
I think it says a lot that we are all peers. I wish there was a way we could make that more evident, because I do think that that's important, that it's the peerage. It's not the knight peerage and the laurel peerage and the pelican peerage and the royal peerage, and it's the peerage.
Right.
But we don't.
And mods, we have to include mods in there too.
Right. But we don't do that enough. There should be some way that we connect ourselves more.
Mm-hmm.
I felt the same way you did when I was offered the pelican. I felt like it was not extraneous, but it was unnecessary because, you know, we were already the peerage, but I couldn't say no to the people that offered it to me. So it's true. So I get that, but I think the thing that, you know, that's how we think, but everybody else perceives, you know, which one you have and what path there is. And when you have more than one, that you are multidimensional. And I don't know if that's really fair, but I think that's where we are right now.
I think everybody's multidimensional. You can't get a laurel without doing some service, and you shouldn't be getting a knighthood without doing some service and some art.
That's what I was trying to say. I was being inarticulate, but like we are all multidimensional, but I feel like if you don't have more than one, people don't think you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I was lucky because I think I couldn't have said no to other people, but I knew them well enough. And I thought they knew my views well enough that it wasn't easy to say no, but it was certainly an option because I knew them so well. And I'd gone through multiple reigns with them already, and they lived in one of the baronies that I had grown up in. And so, and then the reason that he broke my ribs is that he after the ceremony, he picked me up, you know, and I don't even know if people know who Darius is because he hasn't been around for, but a big, very, very large, big man. And he picked me up with both his arms and lifted me off the ground and hugged me and broke my ribs.
Izzy says it's the last hug you will receive unanswered.
Yeah. And sometimes it still hurts.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think of Darius.
I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah, I think they were at a 12th night a couple years back. So
interesting. Well, we are at 8:38, so we should probably wrap it up.
Okay, well, thank you. This isn't as painful as I thought it was going to be, and you didn't cry very much.
A little bit. I tried to be subtle.
Yeah, I saw you. I cried too. So.
Were we supposed to cry?
I at the beginning before we went live said I'm having an emotional day, so I might cry.
I missed the memo.
We didn't even talk about you fighting for me, Rifkin. That was like one of the most amazing experiences in my whole SCA career.
I wish I could have done a little better, but
you did exactly what you're supposed to. It was really, really amazing to have you ask me.
Well, I appreciate you letting me.
So I love you both so much.
We love you too, and it's never going to be painless. We're not that kind of people. Or painful. Maybe I'm tired. It's never going to be painless.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I miss you so much.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be on with us. And I learned a ton about you, and I really appreciate you being so open with your story.
Yeah. Well, and there's so much more. So anytime anybody wants to hear more.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk about that we didn't, and I'm just going to say this really quick, is how wonderful you are at mentoring. Oh. And you're one of those laurels who has mentored me as a laurel and made me more comfortable as a laurel. And I love you for that. So thank you.
I love you too.
She talks about you with love in her voice all the time to me.
Okay, well, stay safe, everybody, and you too, be careful. And I guess we'll maybe see you, I don't know.
Soon. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Are we doing Duke Steingram next week? Is that?
Yes, and we are doing, what are we doing tomorrow?
Yeah, my sister is going to guest host with me tomorrow to interview Duke Conrad von Crixen. Because he is a fabulous artist as well, and I wanted to make sure that we explored him in his multidimensionality. So. And
then Saturday, we're interviewing the Mortensen brothers.
Which should be super fun because those guys are just a kick.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So sorry we had to plug that.
Oh no, of course. Steingram is going to be, I'll be watching for Steingram, and I'll be commenting on some things because there's history, so.
Yeah, we'll put questions in the comments because if you put questions in, we'll try to get to them.
Yep.
So.
Thanks a lot. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.